Good afternoon. I created this demo to show some of the new features that are in CIS 2.7. So CIS 2.7 will post within the next up and coming weeks. So around Christmas time, New Year of end of 2021 going into 2022. So some of the advanced features that are coming in 2.7 are actually kind of cool, and if you follow this playlist, you're going to see some of the demos and some of the examples of kind of what's new. One of the new features is called multi-host, and so multi-host allows CIS to support single virtual server IP on big IP. And so this is similar to the way OpenShift routes work. So if you're using OpenShift routes, but you like the functionality that CRDs brings you, then potentially you can use or you can create another CIS instance and start to pivot or migrate or move over from using OpenShift routes to the VirtualServer CRD using multi-host. The biggest thing with using OpenShift routes is it's host-based. And so if you look at this example here in this demo, you can see why when you're looking at multi-host, you can see the example. So here we have a virtual server of 111, and we've got another virtual server here of the same IP. So this preserves your IP addresses, just like OpenShift routes. What this is also doing here is it's host-based. So Big IP will create a policy just like OpenShift for the host. And so at that point, it's L7 based. All right, so in this first virtual server, you're going to create something called My Site. And in the second virtual server, it's My App. And they're basically tied to the same public IP address. What groups them together is this host group. You can see here this host group and this host group. This is what groups them together. So probably this would be like a namespace or a project name that would kind of group these two applications together. And then of course the monitor can be a monitor for the backend application. It really depends upon what your application is. In this instance here, I'm just using a default monitor for a backend application. You'll notice that my two backends are the same. And that's fine. Both services can be the same. However, the path has to be different. And at this current time, the path cannot be slash, or it cannot be a blank path. That's going to get fixed. Talking to the developer, hopefully 2.7.1, which is an up-and-coming maintenance release after this. If it doesn't get into that release, it'll be a sequential release. You can post a comment if you want to know more about that, and I will follow up either on GitHub or YouTube. So that's really important. So let's go look at those two caveats again. So the multi-host feature is going to be released in 2.7, and in 2.7 the path is required. So you cannot be just blank. Unfortunately, that's just not code. It won't work. What will happen is one virtual server will overwrite the other. So that's really important to know. And again, that's expected to be resolved in 2.7.1. But again, it really depends upon your application. If you don't have any blank slashes, if you have paths for everything, then in your case, it doesn't matter. In my case, I don't have anything on my application, so it does matter. Actually, my side, my app doesn't really work because there's nothing really there. It's just really slash for the blank page. But since yours is more of a custom-built app, there's potentially going to be a specific path that you're probing or looking for based on that application. So let's take a look at this example in a little bit more detail. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to get on Big IP here. We can see that there is no tenant and no app. What I'm also doing is I'm actually monitoring. There's actually no change here. So let's look to see if there's any API call. And so what I'm going to do at this point, I'm just going to see where I am. And so here's my two files. What I'm actually going to do, I'm actually just going to create these two files the same. And so kubectl create, and let's just create these two CRDs. So you created the 2 CRDs. There's the API call. So Postman so accepted those. There's the single. There's the first one, and potentially there's another one coming. So it got the first one. It sees the second one, and so it's waiting for that second. So what happened? It's kind of interesting what happened. It got the first CRD. It configured it, came back and said, okay, I got the second one, and then it added it right there. So let's take a look at the virtual server here. Change to the tenant. So you can actually see one virtual IP address, which is just .11. Let's make this a little bit bigger so we can actually see what it's doing here. So you can see the virtual IP, and what we really care about here is the resources. So the resources is kind of important. So you could actually see the resources here. So here we go. So this is the first one for my app, and then for my site. And you can see there is my app, there is the specific path, and there is my site with that, and there is obviously the specific path. That's really cool. And you can actually see this logic if you actually look at this logic. This is all AS3. So if you actually look at this logic and pull this logic from the big AP, you can actually see the AS3 logic working there. So let's go ahead and recap. This demo is an introduction for multi-host. Multi-host is single virtual IP on the big AP for all of your hosts, and then we do the virtual server routing based on the path. And it could be a same service or could be a different service. For now, keep it within the same namespace for the same host group. If you want to use different namespaces, that's fine, but I haven't tested this with 2 different namespaces for the same host group. So I would just keep it to one. Test it, let me know if it works. If it works, that's great. Post a comment. If it doesn't, then we'll potentially add it to an upcoming release. So what's really important here is this is exactly how OpenShift routes work today. There's a reason why we're bringing this out, and that's going to be the next video. So I'd highly recommend subscribe, watch my YouTube channel, because I'm going to publish another video where we're going to assign a policy CRD to this virtual server. And so a policy CRD is really cool because a policy CRD brings in all the big IP logic, all of the policies, all of the profiles that you need to expand this. And so that's one of the reasons why OpenShift routes is inferior, because in OpenShift routes you only can use the annotations or an AS3 override, right? But that's quite complex. And so with policy CRD, it simplifies this dramatically. And so hence that's why I see potential, a big benefit for moving from OpenShift routes to using the multi-host support with the virtual CRD in 2.7 plus a policy CRD, or as well as a TLS CRD as well to do your TLS termination, whatever requirements that is. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful afternoon.